Hello and welcome to episode 44 of the Idiot Book Nook Book Club podcast. My name is Blazewing, my pronouns are she, her, and they, them.
I am the Reading Dragon, and my pronouns are she, her.
I'm Lady Punnet, and my pronouns are primarily she, her, sometimes they, them. Today is a she, they kind of day.
And we are getting into chapter 28 of the Amulet. We are getting into chapter 28 of the Amulet of Samarkand. But before we do, if you'd like to follow us on social media, you can do so at lanktr.ee/the idiot. lanktr.ee/idiot book nook. You'll find links to all of our socials, our website, our podcast feeds, and all of that. You can follow along. You may also find links to our YouTube as well, where if you missed the stream on Wednesday mornings, you can watch the video over on the Crimson Entertainment YouTube channel, where we also host a D&D thing as well called Crimson Dice. But with that, episode 44 and chapter 28 of the Amulet of Samarkand. Narrator, are you ready?
As ready as I'll ever be.
Take it away! I don't know what to do with that.
Me neither.
Yeah, it's all good. Hold up.
Fucking weirdo.
You're a fucking weirdo.
Yes?
We're all weirdos.
We're all weird here.
We're all mad here. Anyways, chapter 28, take it away.
Okay. The Bartimaeus Trilogy, Book 1, The Amulet of Samarkand, written by Jonathan Stroud, narrated by the Reading Dragon, voice acted by the Reading Dragon, Blazewing 2010, and Lady Punnet. Chapter 28, Bartimaeus.
My apologies for the intrusion, Arthur.
Simon Lovelace said. Underwood had only just entered his long, dark dining room when I caught up with him. He'd spent a few minutes beside the lower landing mirror, smoothing down his hair and adjusting his tie. It didn't make any difference. He still looked disheveled and moth-eaten beside the younger magician, who was standing beside the mantelpiece, examining his nails, as cold and tense as a coiled spring. Underwood waved his hand in an airy attempt at magnanimity.
Magnanimity, yes.
Magnanimity. Okay. Underwood waved his hand in an airy attempt at magnanimity.
My house is yours, I'm sure. I'm sorry for the delay, Lovelace. Won't you take a seat?
Lovelace did not do so. He wore a slim, dark suit with a dark green tie. His glasses caught the lamplight from the ceiling and flashed with every movement of his head. His eyes were invisible, but the skin below the glasses was gray, heavy-bagged.
You seem flustered, Underwood.
He said.
No. I was engaged at the top of the house. I am somewhat out of breath.
I had entered the door as a spider and had crawled my way discreetly over the lintel and up the wall until I reached the secluded gloom of the darkest corner. Here I spun several hasty threads across, obscuring me as fully as possible. I did so because I could see that the magician had his second plane imp with him, prying into every nook and cranny with hot little eyes. Quite how Lovelace had come to suspect that the amulet was in the house, I did not like to guess. For all my denials to the boy, It was certainly an unpleasant coincidence that he had arrived at the exact same time as I had. But working that out could wait. The boy's future, and consequently mine, depended on my reacting quickly to whatever happened now. Underwood sat himself in his customary chair and put on a forced smile.
So,
He said,
are you sure you won't sit down?
No, thank you.
Well, at least tell that imp of yours to quit its jiggling. It's making me feel quite ill.
He spoke with sudden waspish asperity. Simon Lovelace made a clicking sound with his tongue. The imp hovering behind his head instantly became rigid, holding its face with a deliberately unfortunate posture, midway between a gawp and a grin. Underwood did his best to ignore it.
I do have a few other matters to take care of today.
He said.
Perhaps you might tell me what I can do for you.
Simon Lovelace inclined his head gravely.
A few nights ago,
He said,
I suffered a theft. An item, a small piece of some power, was stolen from my house while I was absent.
How about that? Underwood made a consoling sound.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. It is a piece that I hold especially dear. Naturally, I am eager for its return.
Naturally. You think the resistance...
And it is in connection with this that I have called on you today, Underwood.
He spoke slowly, carefully, skirting around the issue. Perhaps even now he hoped he would not have to make the accusation directly. Magicians are always circumspect. Magicians are always circumspect. Magicians are always circumspect with words. Hasty ones, even in a crisis, can lead to misfortune. But the older man was oblivious to the hint.
You can count on my support, of course.
Underwood said, equably.
These thefts are abominations. We've known for some time that a black market for stolen artifacts exists, and I, for one, believe that their sale helps to fund resistance to our rule. We saw yesterday what outrages this can lead to.
Underwood's eyebrows lifted with something like amusement.
I must say,
He went on.
I'm surprised to hear that you've fallen victim. Most recent thefts are perpetrated on, may I be frank, relatively minor magicians. The thieves are often thought to be youths, even children. I would have thought your defenses might have coped with them.
Quite.
Simon Lovelace spoke through his teeth.
Do you think it has any connection with this attack on Parliament?
A moment, please.
Lovelace held up his hand.
I have reason to suspect that the theft of my item was not the work of the so-called resistance, but that of a fellow magician.
Underwood frowned.
You think so? How can you be sure?
Because I know what carried out the raid. It goes by the unseemly name of Bartimaeus, a middle-ranking djinn of great impudence and small intelligence. It is nothing special. Any half-wit might have summoned it. A half-wit magician, that is, not a commoner. Point 1. At this point, someone with excellent hearing might have heard spurts of webbing being shot furiously into the ceiling in the corner of the room. Fortunately, the imp was busy trying to intimidate Underwood by changing its frozen expression very, very slowly. It didn't hear a thing.
Nevertheless,
Underwood said mildly.
this Bartimaeus got away with your item.
It felt a sudden surge. I felt a sudden surge of affection for the old fool. Didn't last long. Just thought I'd mention it.
Yeah.
It was a burglar. It allowed itself to be identified.
Lovelace controlled himself with difficulty. I bet you did, you bastard!
No, you are quite right. It got away.
And as to who summoned it,
The glasses flashed.
Well, Arthur, that is why I am here. To see you.
Oops. There was a momentary pause while Underwood's brain cells struggled to make the connection. Oh, finally success. Several emotions competed for control over his face. Then all were swept away by a kind of glacial smoothness. The temperature in the room grew cold. "Oh,"
I'm sorry.
he said very quietly.
What did you say?
Simon Lovelace leaned forward and rested his two hands on the dining table. He had very well manicured nails.
Arthur,
He said.
Bartimaeus has been keeping a low profile lately.
Has not.
As of this morning, it was imprisoned within the towers of London following its attack on Pins of
Piccadilly.
Piccadilly.
Underwood reeled with astonishment.
That genie? How do you know this? They were unable to learn its name, and it escaped this very afternoon.
It did indeed.
Lovelace did not explain how.
After
Bitch.
its escape, my agents spotted it. They were unable to learn its name. Wait, no, sorry. My agents spotted it. They followed Bartimaeus across London and back here. Oops. It looked as if Lovelace had guessed I might have escaped from Farquhar. He must have set spies watching the tower to trail us once we broke free, and I'd led them straight back to the amulet in double quick time. How embarrassing.
Indeed. Fuck. Underwood shook his head in befuddlement.
Back here? You lie.
Not 10 minutes ago, it disappeared down your chimney in the form of noxious cloud. Are you surprised that I came immediately to reclaim my object? And now that I am inside...
Lovelace raised his head as if he could smell something good.
Ah, yes. I sense its aura. It's close by.
But
I would have never guessed it was you, Arthur. Not that I don't think you
coveted.
coveted my treasures. I just thought you lacked the competence to take them.
The old man opened and shut his mouth like a goldfish, making inarticulate sounds. Lovelace's imp contorted its face for an instant into a violently different expression, then reverted to the original. Its master tapped the table gently with a forefinger.
I could have forced an entry into your house, Arthur. It would have been quite within my rights, but I prefer to be courteous. Also, this piece of mine, as I am sure you are aware, is rather contentious. Contentious. Neither of us would want word of its presence in our houses to get out, now would we? So, if you return it to me with all speed, I am sure we could come to some arrangement that would benefit us both.
He stood back, one hand toying with a cuff.
I'm waiting.
Oh, dear. If Underwood had comprehended one word of what Lovelace was saying, he might have saved himself. If he had recalled his apprentice's misdeeds and put two and two together, all might have been well. But in his confusion, he could see nothing beyond the false accusation being leveled, and in great wrath, he rose from his chair. Oh, here we go.
He could have produced the amulet, agreed to the terms, and seen Lovelace head off satisfied tonight. Of course, now that he knew a little of Lovelace's crimes, he would certainly have bumped off soon afterwards. But that breathing space might have given him time to shave his beard, put a flowery shirt on, fly off somewhere hot and sandy, and so survive.
You pompous upstart!
He cried.
How dare you accuse me of theft? I haven't got your object, I know nothing of it, and want it even less. Why should I take it? I'm not a political lick-spittle like you. I'm no fawning backstabber. I don't go grubbing about after power and influence like a hog in a cesspit. Even if I did, I wouldn't bother robbing you. Everyone knows your star has waned. You're not worth harming. No, your agents have got it wrong. Or, more probably, they lie. Bartimaeus is not here. I know nothing of him, and your trinket is not at my house.
As he was speaking, Simon Lovelace's face seemed to shrink back into a deep shadow, even though the lamplight still played on the surface of his glasses. He shook his head slowly.
Don't be foolish, Arthur,
he said.
My informants do not lie to me. They are things of power that grovel at my command.
The old man jutted forth his beard defiantly.
Get out of my house.
I need hardly tell you what resources I have at my disposal.
Simon Lovelace went on.
But speak softly with me, and we can yet avoid a scene.
I think it's a little too late.
I have nothing to say. Your accusation is false.
Well then.
Simon Lovelace clicked his fingers. Instantly, his imp sprang down from thin air and landed on the mahogany top of the dining room table. It grimaced, strained. A bulb swelled at the end of its tail, finally growing into a prong with a serrated edge. Oh dear. The imp lowered its rump meditatively. The imp lowered its rump meditatively and twirled its tail. Then the prong stabbed down into the polished surface of the tail, cutting it as a knife does butter. Oh, shit. The imp strode across the width of the tabletop, dragging its tail through the wood, slicing it in two. Underwood's eyes bulged in his head. Lovelace smiled. Oh, fuck.
Family heirloom, Arthur?
He said.
Thought so.
The imp had nearly reached the other side when there was a sudden knock at the door. Both men turned. The imp froze in its tracks. Oh no. Mrs. Underwood came in carrying a laden tray.
Here's the tea.
She said.
And some shortbread. That's Arthur's favorite, Mr. Lovelace. I'll just sit it down here, shall I?
Wordlessly, magicians and imp watched as she approached the table. With great care, she set the heavy tray down upon it midway between the sawn crack and the end where Underwood was standing. In the heavy silence, she unloaded a large porcelain teapot, which the invisible imp had to step back to avoid. 2 cups, 2 saucers, 2 plates, a display rack of shortbread, and several items of her best cutlery. The table's end shifted noticeably under their weight. There was a slight creak. Oh. Mrs. Underwood picked up the tray again and smiled at the visitor.
Go on, help yourself, Mr. Lovelace. You need some weight put on you, you do.
Under her direct gaze, Lovelace took a piece of shortbread from the display rack. The tabletop wobbled. He smiled weakly.
That's right. Yell if you want a fresh cup.
With the tray under her arm, Mrs. Underwood bustled out. They watched her go. The door closed. As one, magicians and imp turned back to the table. With a resounding crash, the single connecting spur of wood gave way. One whole end of the table, complete with teapot, cups, saucers, plates, and shortbread, and several pieces of the Underwood's best cutlery, collapsed onto the floor. The imp jumped clear and landed on the mantelpiece beside the display of dead flowers. There was a brief silence. Simon Lovelace tossed his piece of shortbread into the mess on the floor.
What I can do to a wooden table, I can do to a blockhead, Arthur,
He said. Arthur Underwood looked at him. He spoke strangely, as if from a great distance.
That was my best teapot.
Oh. He gave 3 whistles, shrill, high-pitched. An answering call sounded, deep and booming. And up from the tiles before the fireplace rose a sturdy goblin imp, blue-faced and brawny. Underwood gestured, whistled once. The goblin imp sprang, turning in midair. He fell upon the smaller imp that cowered behind the flower beds. That cowered behind the flower heads, scooped it up with his fingerless paws, and began to squeeze it, heedless of the flailing sawtooth prong. The small imp's substance, contorted, blurred, was molded like putty. In a trice it had been squashed down, tail and all, into a yellowish, pulpy ball. The goblin imp smoothed down the surface of the ball, flicked it into the air, opened its mouth, and swallowed it. Underwood turned back to Lovelace, who had watched all this tight-lipped. I confess, the old man surprised me. He was putting up a better show than I'd expected. Nevertheless, the strain of raising that tame imp was taking its toll. The back of his neck was sweaty. Lovelace knew this too.
One last chance.
He snapped.
Give me my property, or I'll raise the stakes. Lead me to your study.
Never!
Underwood was beside himself with strain and rage. He did not heed the promptings of common sense.
Watch, then.
Lovelace smoothed back his oiled hair. He spoke a few words under his breath. There was a frisson in the dining room. Everything in it flickered. The wall at the far end of the room became insubstantial. It receded, moving farther and farther back until it could no longer be seen. In its place, a corridor of uncertain dimensions stretched away. As Underwood watched, a figure appeared far off along the corridor. It began to move toward us, growing larger at great speed, but floating, for its legs were still. Underwood gasped and stumbled back. He knocked against his chair. He was right to gasp. Oh, I knew that figure. The bulky frame. The jackal's head.
Stop!
Underwood's face was waxen. He gripped his chair for support.
What was that?
Simon Lovelace held his fingers to his ear.
I can't hear you. How unnecessary. What play actors these magicians are.
For real? Like, seriously?
Stop. All right, you win. I'll take you to my study now. Call it off.
The figure grew in size. Underwood was cowering. The goblin imp made a rueful face and withdrew hastily back through the tiles. I shifted in my corner, wondering quite what I was going to do when Jabor finally entered the room.
So Farquhar had been right. A small army of Horlos and Utuku had been unable to stop Jabor. This didn't bode too well.
No, it does not. It really doesn't. Fuck. All at once, Lovelace gave a sign. The infinite corridor and the approaching figure vanished. The wall was there again, as before. A yellowed photograph of Underwood's smiling grandmother hanging in its center. Underwood was on his knees beside the ruins of his tea service. He shook so hard he could barely stand.
Which way to your study, Arthur?
Simon Lovelace said.
And thus ends chapter 28 of the Amulet of Samarkand.
Oh my fuck.
Question.
Yes.
How does Arthur Underwood have a picture of his grandmother if he was taken from a young age?
I don't know.
Interesting.
Because if it's not his grandmother, why does Arthur Underwood have a picture of a little old lady in his dining room?
Well, here's the thing.
What if Grandma's a magician?
A yellowed photograph of Underwood's smiling grandmother hanging in its center. We hadn't been led to believe there was anything like this before the wall disappeared. Theoretically, we could assume that it is, because it's being brought to our attention now, that it is a new addition, which means either Lovelace is setting it up to spy, or it's one of Underwood's security measures, and possibly an insurance policy. We don't know. We don't have enough information. But the fact that it's being brought to our attention now, instead of when he first entered the room, is highly suspicious.
Oh, yeah.
Because when he entered the room... Give me a second, let me scroll back up here.
It was described as really dark and foreboding.
1 second. There's that. Yeah, I don't see any big description of the room. His glasses caught the lamplight from the ceiling and flashed with every movement of his head. The spider, which is Bartimaeus, went to the gloomiest and darkest corner, spinning threads. Arthur pulled out his customary chair. There's no actual description of the room itself, which leads me to believe, like I said, that this is new.
Oh, yeah.
But it's still weird, like, the fact that it's described as, like, Arthur's grandmother, when we know for a fact that, like, you're taken from a young age, you don't remember your parents. So, maybe it's not so much his grandmother, maybe it's his old master.
Could be.
Unless old master was grandma.
Could be.
I don't think that grandma would have been his, his biological grandmother would have been his master, because biological grandmother would have known his birth name. And it sounds like they're taken from a young age. And besides, if grandma was a magician, she wouldn't have had kids. Remember? There's that whole thing about magicians aren't allowed to have kids because then it encourages blood feuds.
Depends on when that rule started up.
Mm-hmm.
You guys continue talking. I'll be back in just a quick sec.
There's also the possibility that maybe the grandmother, if it is a biological grandmother, maybe she was actually estranged from the family for a really long time. Like, say, going off of what you said, where magicians can't necessarily have kids. If grandmother is grandmother, she probably had a kid probably around the time that rule was implemented, probably had to give up her child, and still kind of kept watch over things from a distance, maybe, but didn't see any signs of magic or anything like that. So it's like, okay, in the clear, whatever. But then seeing that her children, her children's children, her grandson, Arthur Underwood, was expressing magic. She probably saw it as an opportunity to be like, oh, shit, this kid is showing magic and is probably going to become apprentice. I don't want anyone else putting two and two together, really, by seeing me, so I'm going to take him under my wing.
Maybe. I don't foresee it happening. It could just be like a security measure that's put in place when, like, large bouts of magic occur.
So basically, going off of what I just said, if she was the one that took Arthur under her wing to make it so that way no one would really, like, suspect outside of it, like, preventing anyone else from taking him, and then seeing him next to her and being like, wait a minute, what if she was what if she was his master, and because of that whole thing is part of the reason why he has the traumas that he has?
Maybe. I don't know. It seems a little out of left field, because literally in the first few chapters we were told that magicians aren't allowed to have biological children. It is against the law. However, who's to say if that's like... No, I think it was like a universal law. At least we know for sure it's in London. So,
I don't really have anything to add to that line of thought. I've only got a couple of just quick jot notes here. Appearance is everything to magicians, from what we've been told, because it makes a point of pointing out how they look. The fact that Arthur took a couple of minutes to actually smooth his hair back to make himself presentable. And then there was the whole play around with the words and the dodging of the topics. The second note I have goes kind of along with that. Magician politics. Ugh.
Yeah.
And Underwood has power, but still not enough to beat Lovelace. Confirmed.
Yep.
Because he is folded unless he's trying to lead him into a trap or some shit.
I don't know, because you can't fake sweat.
Correct.
So I think So maybe my theory about Underwood being like a super powerful magician isn't true, but I bet even if he's not like super powerful, like magic-wise, I bet he's super knowledgeable.
I'm curious to know, though, and just bear with me here. Who would win in a fight, Lovelace or Nathaniel?
I think, given the fact that Bartimaeus is worried about the fact that he has Jabor and Farquhar, I think if it was just how they both stand now, it would be Lovelace. If given time to prepare, or better yet, if they both couldn't have, like, Farquhar, Jabor, and Bartimaeus, and they just had to summon whatever demons they could in a pinch, it'd be harder to say, but I would say that at this point right now, I think Lovelace would have the upper hand.
Fair point.
But if we gave Bartimaeus a couple of years, I do think the way they're, like, setting up Nathaniel is he's the type of character that if you give him the right environment to grow and continue to have that education, can easily surpass his peers. Think like Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory.
Fair.
Yeah.
Basically, he was taking university courses by the time he was like 14.
Yeah.
Fair. Totally fair. Do we have anything else we want to add this chapter?
Yes. So Farquhar mentioned before that Lovelace is reckless.
Yep.
This is another example of him being reckless, because he's not sitting and thinking.
Yep.
Like, it was revealed early on that people don't think highly of Lovelace, of Underwood. They think he's like a subpar thing. So he's not taking it back a second and thinking, okay, this guy's acting either has really good acting or something's up. He's not thinking that maybe someone else sent him here, that Bartimaeus was sent here to throw them off, that maybe it's another magician, that it could be Nathaniel, which I think the only reason they aren't thinking it's Nathaniel is because he's still an apprentice.
His Lovelace isn't thinking that it's Nathaniel yet.
Not yet, anyway. But he's being very reckless and going in there and not fully comprehending what he's doing, because they're both ministry workers.
Mm-hmm.
And although Mrs. Underwood isn't a ministry worker, I don't think she was that dense to see something's not going on right now.
Also,
so, which is why I kind of think that she did that little dig on him on purpose.
Yeah.
That whole, you need to put some meat on your bones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm also thinking that this might be a trauma response for her, too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a possibility. Because she could have been because here's the thing, magicians can't have children.
Mm-hmm.
But we also haven't seen her do anything. So she could have been a magician that just chose not to continue being a magician.
Mm-hmm.
So she might have enough awareness of things that are going on.
Mm-hmm.
But she probably also has the trauma that happened to her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when she was younger, especially if we think how shitty masters were.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Mrs. Underwood, fucking love her.
Yup.
She looked at the man who she knows is more powerful than her husband and said, "You're too skinny. You should have some of these cookies. They're my husband's favorite. Put some meat on your bones." Stared him down until he took a damn cookie.
He did so weakly.
Which I can't tell if that's Lovelace drinking his respect women juice or the fact that he was trying to keep up appearances.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have anything else to go on.
Nothing I can think of off the top of my head, because this is mostly, although something to note actually that I find interesting, it was how Lovelace described Bartimaeus.
Oh yeah.
He described Bartimaeus as a
mid-tier, mid-level.
Yeah, let me just, I'm gonna go up and find the exact quote.
So insulting.
Da, 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 da.
Bartimaeus is offended.
Yeah. He's literally just been insulted. Every fiber of him has just been insulted.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you? Where are you? Here we go. It goes by the unseemly name of Bartimaeus, a middle-ranking djinn of great impudence and small intelligence. It is nothing special. Any half-wit might have summoned it. A half-wit magician that it is not a commoner. So,
not only did he insult Bartimaeus, but he intended to insult Underwood, but has insulted instead Nathaniel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even looking at that. Because here's the thing. Farquhar and Jabor consider Bartimaeus to be on the same level as them.
Mm-hmm. And Bartimaeus is at least a level 14.
We don't know what the highest level is, but 14 seems like a pretty high level. Mm-hmm. So it's making me wonder if maybe, because Farquhar tried to get Bartimaeus to join him.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if Farquhar wasn't completely honest with how important Bartimaeus is. Or how old Bartimaeus is. Because here's the thing. He's been described as an old demon. I don't think someone that's considered that old would be middle tier. Maybe upper middle, but not mid tier.
Fair.
Wasn't Paul also mentioning in previous chapters how he's just waiting for the right moment to get his over Lovelace?
That is true. This could have been a chance for him to do that.
I'm wondering if he's trying to mislead Lovelace into potentially trying to seek out and attack Bartimaeus in an effort to have his ass handed to him.
Mm-hmm.
And teach Lovelace a lesson and knock him down a peg or two. Because right now, Lovelace seems to be on a fucking horse. Let's not beat around the bush here. He seems to think pretty highly of himself. And
He's on a war horse.
He seems to think that he's invincible. So...
He thinks he's invincible. He thinks that no one can touch him. And that he's right. He can just barge in and do whatever the fuck he wants. Because he's well within his right.
Yeah.
Which, depending on what laws there are, like, different universe entirely, my D&D character, Briar Whitlock, her god is Oladamara, which one of his dogmas is hold on tight to what is precious to you, because if someone takes it from you, then you weren't guarding it well enough. But the person who takes it makes sure you are ready to face the consequences. I'm wondering if they follow a similar thing, where you have to heavily guard your stuff, otherwise it's your own fault if it goes missing, and that the person who takes it has to be ready for the consequences.
Fair.
Because from what we've seen, it doesn't look like they actually have police force.
Except for Lovelace.
The night police.
Well,
they did mention the night police.
They did mention the night police, but we haven't actually, like, seen them.
Yeah.
And also, like you said, they don't have much. Outside of the night police, they don't have much of a, task force for, like, police or anything like that. More than likely outside of Lovelace. And Lovelace has mentioned that he doesn't get funding for his position whatsoever.
Oh, you mean Underwood?
That was Underwood.
Underwood. I meant to say Underwood.
Yeah, he was in charge of, like, thefts of items and stuff.
Yeah. So, who's to say Underwood is not effectively kind of part of that whole police force thing, or at least a special sector of it that's not being taken seriously.
Yeah.
That is fair. Because I wonder if they have, like, different, like, I wonder if, like, the murder of, say, a magician, there's a different task force for that, there's a different task force for, like, theft. And stuff like that. Because it makes me wonder, because we've seen how they take the theft of magical items very seriously, especially for, like, the Amulet of Samarkand, Nefertiti's anklet, which I want that anklet, by the way. I wonder if it only works on husbands. Like, what if you have two lesbian? Is it just like a life partner type situation? These are questions I got to know.
Absolutely.
I don't know, but I'd love to have something like that for myself too, for obvious reasons. Obvious reasons for those in the Discord chat on the stream.
Yep.
And anyone who might be in the audience that is like, oh yeah, I know what she's talking about.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's all I can think of off the top of my head.
Dragon, got anything else?
That's about it for me.
Awesome. Well, I guess that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Idiot Book Nook then. Give me 1 second here. I believe that is episode 44 and chapter 28 of the Amulet of Samarkand. I want to thank you very much for joining us for today's discussion and whatnot. And if you'd like to follow us on social media, you can do so at linktr.ee/idiotbooknook. You can find links to all of our socials, you can find links to our website, and you can also find links to all of our podcast feeds, including Anchor, where you can leave us voicemail messages, anchor.fm/idiot-book-nook.
Yay.
It's been fun, guys. I've really enjoyed today's discussions, so thank you very much once again for joining. We are going to close this episode down, and then we have some things to discuss off podcast. So, for episode 44 of the Idiot Book Nook, my name's Blazewing.
I am the Reading Dragon.
I'm Lady Punnet.
And we will see you guys for episode 45 of the Amulet of Samarkand.
Now we get to episode 45.
Yeah, something like that.
Yay!
Hey!
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Why?